We begin our report on the shores of Normandy, France, where President Biden and world leaders honored the Allied forces that fought against tyranny on June 6, 1944. The President and First Lady laid a wreath for those who lost their lives. Earlier, they met and shook hands with the veterans 80 years after the largest seaborne invasion in history. In a ceremony attended by the leaders of France, Britain, Germany, Canada, the Netherlands, and Ukraine, President Biden connected the war 8 decades ago to conflicts today.
Aggression and greed, the desire to dominate and control, to change borders by force, these are perennial. The struggle between a dictatorship and freedom is unending. Ukraine has been invaded by a tyrant bent on domination. Ukrainians are fighting with extraordinary courage, suffering great losses, but never backing down.
CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Paris. Ed, the president made no mistake about where this speech was headed, but it was aimed at the ally who's not there, Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, John, in what was a really incredible use of an otherwise solemn ceremony, the president struck back at, as you said, Russia, who was not officially invited by the French government to attend this year's anniversary, and used his remarks to draw comparisons between what happened 80 years ago this week and what's happening at the other end of Europe right now, calling Russia a tyrant and a bully. And among those despots around the world, Vladimir Putin is, who's trying to blow away borders without the consent of the people within them. A pretty stark international political speech delivered on the world stage to the world, and trying to unite Europe behind the cause that the United States has led over the last 2 years, roughly, as the war in Ukraine continues. That Volodymyr Zelensky is here in France for these commemorations, meeting with his counterparts from the United States tomorrow, from France, from Canada and other countries, is designed to reinforce the support at least the Western world has for him, and show Russia again how united Europe is. But this has traditionally been something that American commanders-in-chief use to pay tribute, to speak in a more unified way about the common cause. But instead today, it was used to draw really sharp contrast with Russia.
Tomorrow, the president will speak at Pointe du Hoc Ranger Station. Remind us why that location is significant, and what do you expect from him there?
It was what the Second Army Rangers had done to climb those cliffs about 100 feet to neutralize and end attacks from German artillery. That has been memorialized by commanders-in-chief in the past, most notably Ronald Reagan, who spoke in 1984 about the boys of Pointe du Hoc. President Biden is planning on seizing on similar themes that Reagan touched on in his 1984 speech, concerns about the future of democracy. And the White House has said that while today's remarks were obviously designed to reach France and Europe and the world, tomorrow's is more directed at Americans themselves. And the concerns that the president has about what's going on with democracy in the United States, or what could transpire after the elections this November. So while we don't expect him to explicitly call out his anticipated opponent, Donald Trump, it'll be unmistakable to the ear who or what he's inferring when he raises concerns about the risks. The fact that his likely opponent is someone who, of course, is now a convicted felon, has said and done things detrimental to democratic norms, lowercase democratic norms. And it should be quite a contrast, again, using the world stage to try to score domestic political points, or at least make some domestic political points.
Back on that notion, back on the world stage, the president will hold talks with French President Emmanuel Macron. And throughout the conflict, the invasion in Ukraine, we've seen where European leaders will say something and the White House or the president will say, no, we're not going to go that far. And then ultimately they get there. The most recent decision to attack positions inside of Russia would be an example. In that context, then, Macron has talked about the fact that NATO soldiers may or NATO troops may sometime be involved in what's happening in Ukraine. Do you think that'll be what they'll talk about? And if not, what will they talk about when they meet tomorrow?
So not only the possibility that NATO troops would potentially be engaged, but more specifically, Macron has left open the door to just sending French troops on his own unilaterally and outside the alliance. We spoke with the French ambassador to the United States in recent days who said, yes, that's not something we're willing to rule out quite yet. We will make that decision if we have to. So that'll be one subject of conversation. General agreement the two leaders have on Gaza and Israel and how that war should be concluded. But France is a major benefactor and supporter of the International Criminal Court, which is seeking the arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leaders of Hamas. France's argument is you can try to use that court for some things, but if you're going to do it for some things, you've got to do it for all, because the United States has called on the ICC to potentially help prosecute Putin and other Russians for war crimes in the Ukraine. Beyond that, they've got common concern about China, but are approaching that situation differently, and shared concerns and experiences with climate change, although the French and many other countries would be worried about whether or not the United States will remain committed to global climate change agreements should the Biden administration end next year. So lots to discuss with America's oldest ally in meetings that are set to formally be held Saturday and Sunday.
Ed O'Keefe in Paris. Thank you so much, Ed.